At my parents' 40th anniversary party, I smiled, walked up to my father, and handed him an official eviction notice for his own home. This wasn't cruelty, it was justice. Because 30 years ago, they did the same thing to my grandmother, and I still had her letter. My name is Margaret, I'm 38 years old, and my story doesn't begin with a fairy tale, but with an ending. It happened last night, under the glittering crystal chandeliers of the Charleston Preservation Society's annual gala. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and old money, a familiar perfume I'd grown up with in our sprawling historic home south of Broad Street. From the outside, we were the Sterlings, a name synonymous with a $250 million real estate empire. But inside, I was just the quiet architect of their success, the one who made the numbers work. As I was speaking with a potential investor, my mother, Beverly, glided over, her smile as flawless and cold as her diamond necklace. She pulled me aside, her manicured fingers gripping my arm just a little too tightly, and whispered into my ear, her voice a venomous drop of honey. "Honey, you are lucky we even let you stand here with us. A plain face needs a good family name, and pity goes a long way." I just smiled. I let her words hang in the air between us, a final, perfect monument to decades of quiet dismissals. That night, I went home to my condo overlooking the harbor, opened my laptop, and systematically dismantled the empire I had saved. I logged into the system I built, froze the family's $50 million charitable foundation, and set in motion an automatic audit that would be emailed to the entire board of directors by 8 a.m. Then, I placed a legal lien on our historic Kiowa Island beach house, stopping my father from illegally mortgaging it. This wasn't just another chapter in our family drama. It was the start of one of those unforgettable family revenge stories. If you've ever felt like the hidden engine in your own family, the one whose worth was always conditional, just do me a favor and type the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story of quiet rebellion can reach. To understand why I could do that, why I could press enter and feel nothing but a cold, quiet relief, you have to understand the gilded cage I grew up in. Our home was one of those magnificent antebellum mansions in Charleston's historic district, with a sprawling piazza and gardens that were featured in magazines. It was a beautiful prison, filled with priceless antiques and suffocating expectations. From the outside, the Sterling family was the epitome of Southern grace, a dynasty built on $250 million of prime real estate. But inside that grand home, emotional currency was worthless. My entire childhood was a performance. I got straight A's, became the high school valedictorian, and graduated with honors from Wharton, one of the best business schools in the country. Each achievement was met with a polite, dismissive nod. It was simply what was expected. Meanwhile, my brother, Greg, would get a parade for winning a local golf tournament or closing a minor deal he was handed. His mediocrity was celebrated, while my excellence was just my required rent for existing in their world. I was the dependable, invisible daughter. He was the charming, visible heir. It's a classic story, isn't it? The fixer and the star. It makes you wonder about the roles we're assigned. Let me know in the comments. Were you the savior in your family, the one who was always expected to fix things and be responsible? Or were you the star, the one who was always meant to shine? I'm genuinely curious to see the dynamic in your families. That dynamic, that invisible set of rules, was the very foundation of our family's spectacular decay. It dictated everything. And the people who enforced these rules? Well, they were like characters ripped from a Southern Gothic novel. My father, Walter Sterling, was a portrait of the perfect Southern gentleman to the outside world. He spoke often of legacy, honor, and the weight of the Sterling name. But his words were hollow, a beautifully constructed facade to hide a man who was emotionally bankrupt. His real family wasn't us, it was Sterling Properties. He could tell you the square footage of every commercial property we owned from Charleston to Savannah, but he couldn't remember my major in college. I was just another asset on his balance sheet, one that was, thankfully, low maintenance. Then there was my mother, Beverly. She was the undisputed queen of Charleston's high society, her life a meticulously curated calendar of charity board meetings, garden parties, and galas. Her love was entirely conditional, measured by appearances. She didn't chair the Children's Hospital Foundation out of compassion. She did it for the photograph in the society pages. My achievements were only valuable if they could be mentioned in passing at the country club. And my brother, Greg, he was their masterpiece. He was handsome, effortlessly charming, and had been taught his entire life that his last name was a substitute for character. He was the golden boy, destined to take over the company, despite having no genuine aptitude for it. Together, they formed a perfect, impenetrable triangle of entitlement and neglect, with me on the outside, looking in, yet somehow holding the entire structure up. And the greatest irony? Their combined incompetence was what handed me the keys to the kingdom. By my late 20s, Sterling Properties was bleeding money. It was an old money empire running on old money methods, paper ledgers, handshake deals, and a complete refusal to enter the 21st century. So, I stepped in. I spent 2 years of late nights and weekends designing and building a proprietary digital platform to manage our entire $250 million portfolio. It streamlined everything, from tenant management to predictive investment analytics. Within a year, profits were up 30%. It was my masterpiece. And my brother, Greg, stole it. He took my work, put his name on a slick presentation, and pitched it to my father as his own visionary initiative. I watched from the back of the boardroom as he was met with a standing ovation. He was promoted to vice president of development and given a bonus that was more than my entire salary. The Charleston Business Journal ran a cover story on him, the young prodigy revolutionizing his family's legacy. Later that day, my father found me in my office. He didn't praise my innovation or acknowledge my work. He just put a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "Good work, Maggie. At least you're useful to the family business." Useful, not brilliant. Not visionary. Just a useful tool. It's a special kind of pain, isn't it? To build something incredible only to watch someone else take the credit. Let me know in the comments, have you ever been the ghost in the machine? The one doing all the real work behind the scenes? Just type ghost if you know exactly what that feels like. And useful I became. For the next decade, that was my entire identity. After the platform he launched, I was quietly deputized as the unofficial chief financial officer, personal wealth manager, and 24/7 tech support for the entire Sterling clan. I managed the trusts, optimized their taxes, and set up the very accounts they used to fund their lavish lifestyles. I was the one who got the frantic 10 p.m. call from my mother because she couldn't connect her new iPad to the Wi-Fi, and the one who had to calmly walk Greg through a stock trade he was about to bungle. I was their safety net, their silent fixer, the bedrock upon which their effortless lives were built. But in public, I was a footnote. At every garden party and country club brunch, Beverly would introduce me with that tight, condescending smile, patting my hand as if I were a charity case. "This is my Maggie," she would tell her circle of friends, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "She handles all those complicated numbers for us. Bless her heart." In the South, bless her heart is the genteel way of calling you pathetic. For 10 years, I swallowed that casual cruelty, telling myself that my competence was its own reward. I kept hoping that one day they would finally see me, truly see the value I brought. But my hope was misplaced. I wasn't a daughter. I was infrastructure. And the problem with being infrastructure is that no one ever notices you until you break down. And the breakdown didn't come from me. It came from the rot within the Sterling legacy, and I was the only one with the access to see it. It started 2 weeks before the gala, during a routine quarterly review. I noticed a series of unusual wire transfers from the Sterling Family Foundation account. They were disguised as grants to obscure nonprofits, but the digital trail was sloppy. My brother's sloppy. I followed the breadcrumbs. It wasn't just gambling debt anymore. This was full-blown embezzlement. Greg was using our family's $50 million charitable foundation, my mother's pride and joy, the very source of her social power, as his personal slush fund to pay off casino markers in Vegas and Atlantic City. He was committing a felony, a crime that could not only land him in prison but would utterly obliterate the Sterling name in Charleston forever. As I dug deeper, horrified, I found something even worse. To cover another one of Greg's disastrous business ventures, my father had begun the process of taking out a secret 7-figure mortgage on our family's beach house on Kiowa Island. That cottage wasn't just a property, it was a sacred space, left to Greg and me in a trust by our grandmother with the explicit condition that it was never to be leveraged or sold. It was the only place I ever felt peace, and my father was about to sign it away to protect his failing son, committing mortgage fraud in the process. It was no longer neglect. This was a conscious, calculated betrayal of his own daughter and his own mother's final wishes. So I walked into that grand ballroom at the Gaylord Center, a ghost at my own family's feast. The air was buzzing with the conversations of Charleston's elite, a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and practiced laughter. It was all so beautiful, so perfectly staged, and it was all a lie. For the first time, I saw them not as my family, but as characters. My father, Walter, stood near the bar, pontificating to a state senator about the importance of business integrity, and I had to physically stop myself from laughing out loud. He was leveraging our family's history away, and here he was, preaching about honor. My mother, Beverly, was in her element, basking in the spotlight as the gracious chairwoman of the foundation, accepting praise for its generosity, completely oblivious that its funds were being used to cover her son's gambling losses. And Greg. My brother looked like a cornered animal in his $1,000 tuxedo. He was jumpy, his eyes darting around the room, a fine sheen of sweat on his brow. He couldn't stay off his phone for more than 30 seconds. I knew he wasn't closing a deal. He was probably checking the score of a game he had bet the rest of his life on. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me as I watched their performance. They had no idea I knew. They still saw me as the quiet, useful wallpaper in their grand lives. It's a strange, lonely power, isn't it? To be the only one who knows the truth. If you've ever had to wear a mask and smile through a family event while carrying the weight of a terrible secret, just take a second and type what time it is right now where you are. I want to mark this moment with everyone who understands that deafening silence. The tipping point arrived, as it always did, not because of something I did wrong, but because I did something right. I was in a deep conversation with Harrison Croft, a self-made developer from Atlanta whose tech-integrated approach to real estate was making my father nervous. Harrison wasn't interested in my family name. He was asking sharp, insightful questions about market analytics and digital infrastructure. For 5 glorious minutes, I wasn't Walter Sterling's daughter. I was a respected peer. I felt a spark of my old self, the ambitious Wharton graduate, and I saw a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. And, of course, my mother saw it too. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she gracefully detached herself from a conversation, her smile never faltering as she began a direct, calculated path across the ballroom floor toward us. She arrived like a beautiful, silent predator. "Harrison, darling," she cooed, placing a proprietary hand on my arm. "You must not bore yourself with all these technical details. Maggie is just a whiz at tidying up the numbers for us." Harrison, a gentleman, took the cue and excused himself. The moment he was gone, the warmth vanished from my mother's face. Her grip tightened on my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin as she steered me toward the tall French doors leading to the terrace. The noise of the party faded behind us. It was just the two of us, bathed in the cool moonlight, the scent of night-blooming jasmine in the air. She looked me up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal, and a cold smirk played on her lips. She leaned in, the diamonds on her ears catching the moonlight, and her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honey," she said, the word dripping with false affection. "You are lucky we even let you stand here with us. A plain face needs a good family name, and pity goes a long way." And there it was. The truth. Not shouted in anger, but delivered like a quiet, fatal dose of poison. In that instant, the distant sound of the orchestra behind us seemed to warp and fade. The entire glittering, chaotic party melted away into a profound, dead silence in my mind. It wasn't a crack. It was a clean, silent shearing of a bond I had spent 38 years trying to preserve. Pity. That was the word that echoed. I wasn't an unappreciated daughter, a brilliant but overlooked strategist, or even a useful tool. I was a charity case. My entire existence in their lives was an act of condescending mercy. And in that moment of absolute devastation, a strange and terrible clarity washed over me. The hope I had clung to for decades, the hope that one day they would see me, value me, evaporated. It was a fiction I had told myself. My mother's cruelty was a gift. It was the truth, and it set me free. I looked up and met her cold, expectant eyes, and I smiled. Not a pained smile, but a slow, genuine, and deeply unsettling one. She had expected tears. She was not prepared for my peace. There's always one moment, isn't there? One sentence that cuts through all the years of excuses. The moment the truth is laid bare. If you've ever had a moment that shattered the illusion for good, just type the word clarity in the comments below. Let's acknowledge that painful, powerful turning point together. I didn't say another word to my mother. I simply turned, walked back through that glittering ballroom without a single glance back, collected my coat, and left. The 20-minute drive back to my condo on the harbor was the calmest I had felt in years. The decision had been made for me. The weight of hope, of trying, of caring, it was all gone. All that was left was the cold, clean logic of cause and effect. I got home, slipped out of my gown, and sat down at my desk, not with a glass of wine, but with a glass of ice water. This was not an act of passion, it was a demolition. A controlled, systematic demolition. First, the foundation. With a few keystrokes, I placed an administrative lock on all outbound transfers from their $50 million fund. Then, I scheduled an automated security alert for 8:00 a.m. the next morning. The alert would flag Greg's high-volume withdrawals as anomalous activity and would be sent not only to my father, but to the entire external board of directors, the most respected judges and business leaders in Charleston. Next, the Kiowa Beach House. I opened the scanned copy of my grandmother's will, attached the specific, legally binding clauses about the property trust to an email, and sent it to our family's attorney. The subject line read, "Urgent, injunction to prevent breach of fiduciary duty." Finally, I accessed the master control panel for the Sterling Properties Management platform. My platform. And with a quiet click, I changed every administrator-level password and revoked all secondary access credentials. By midnight, the Sterling Empire was a ghost ship, lights on, engines dead in the water, and I was the only one who knew how to turn them back on. I slept for 8 solid hours for the first time since college and woke up not to my alarm, but to the frantic buzzing of my phone skittering across the nightstand. 21 missed calls from my father. 43 increasingly desperate and misspelled texts from Greg. I didn't read a single one. I just calmly got up and brewed a pot of coffee, letting the rich aroma fill my quiet apartment. At precisely 8:00 a.m., I imagined the scene, the iPhones of judges, bank presidents, and old money matriarchs all across Charleston chiming in unison with my automated security alert. An emergency board meeting for the foundation would be called by 8:30. My mother's carefully crafted reputation as a philanthropist and society leader, her entire life's work, had just become a potential crime scene. The whispers would start before brunch. Then, around 9:15, I pictured my father in his mahogany-paneled corner office, preparing for a critical meeting with a team of investors from New York. I could almost see the color drain from his face as he tried to access the company's financials on the main screen, only to be met with a single, damning phrase: access denied. For a man like Walter Sterling, public incompetence is a fate worse than death. His carefully maintained image of absolute control had just been shattered in front of the very people he sought to impress. There's a quiet satisfaction, isn't there, in watching a carefully constructed house of cards begin to fall. It's not about hate. It's about the clean, simple, undeniable arrival of justice. If you believe that everyone, no matter how powerful, should eventually have to face the music, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells the world that stories about accountability matter. The weeks that followed were a predictable storm of legal threats, frantic phone calls, and my mother's attempts at emotional blackmail through mutual friends. But their power was gone. I had the truth, and I had the best lawyer in South Carolina. The storm passed. After months of negotiation, I agreed to a full, clean buyout of my $20 million inheritance from my grandmother's trust. I handed over the passwords in exchange for my freedom. Then, I packed my bags, left Charleston and its ghosts in my rearview mirror, and moved to Atlanta. I started my own firm, Sterling Analytics, taking back my own name. I built it from the ground up, on my own terms, with my own skill. Fast forward 1 year. My firm was thriving. I was on site at a new client's high-rise development in Midtown, the kind of project I loved, all data and logistics. I was reviewing some blueprints when I heard a familiar voice. I looked up, and standing 30 feet away, I saw him. It was Greg. But it wasn't the Greg I knew. He wasn't in a custom Italian suit. He was wearing dusty steel-toed boots, a faded polo shirt, and a bright yellow hard hat. He was holding a clipboard, directing a forklift operator. He was a site assistant. Our eyes met across the noisy, chaotic construction yard. I saw a flicker of panic in his, then a deep flush of shame that spread across his face. He looked away for a second, then looked back and gave me a slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a conversation. But it was the first honest thing he had ever given me. It was an acknowledgement. A few months after that silent nod, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was Greg. The subject line was just one word: coffee? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small, anonymous cafe, a neutral ground far from the ghosts of Charleston. He looked different up close. The last traces of entitlement had been worn away, replaced by a quiet weariness. He didn't make excuses. He told me everything. About hitting rock bottom after the money was gone, about his first terrifying Gamblers Anonymous meeting, about the humbling, backbreaking work of a manual labor job. He spoke about our father forcing him into it, telling him he had to learn the value of $1 from the ground up. Then he looked me straight in the eye. "I was always jealous of you, Maggie," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Not for the money. I was jealous because you built things. I only knew how to inherit them. And I need to say thank you for what you did, for destroying everything. It was the only thing that could have saved me." Hearing those words was like feeling the last piece of a puzzle click into place after years of searching. The anger I had held onto for so long simply dissolved. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about understanding. It's a shocking thing, isn't it? That sometimes the most destructive act is actually an act of salvation. I want to know what you think. Do you believe people can truly change after they've hit rock bottom? Type yes in the comments if you believe in redemption, or no if you think some patterns are just too deep to break. There's no judgment here, only our shared experiences. But while my brother was slowly, painfully rebuilding his life on a foundation of truth, my parents were trying to rebuild their fallen kingdom on the same old lies. The moment they heard Greg and I had spoken, they saw it not as a sign of healing, but as a strategic opening. My father sent a formal, 3-page letter through his attorney. It wasn't an apology. It was a business proposal, outlining a plan for my reintegration into Sterling Properties, complete with a generous compensation package and a new title. He wrote about my duty to the Sterling legacy and the need to stabilize the family's financial future. He still saw me as a function, a highly skilled employee he was trying to rehire, not a daughter he had deeply wounded. My mother's approach was even more insidious. She left a long, rambling voicemail, her voice thick with practiced sorrow. She talked about how people were talking, how my actions reflected poorly on the family, and how it was time to let bygones be bygones and put this unpleasantness behind us. There was no accountability, no acknowledgement of her words on that terrace. She wanted to erase history, not learn from it. I didn't get angry. I just felt a profound sense of finality. I wrote one last email, addressed to both of them. I told them that a relationship could not be negotiated like a contract, and that my love wasn't for sale. It required respect and an honest accounting of the past. Until they could offer that, the boundary I had created was permanent. Hitting send was the final, quiet click of the lock on my cage, this time turned from the inside. It's been 3 years since that night at the gala. I'm sitting on the balcony of my own home in Atlanta, a place I chose, I built, I paid for. The city lights glitter below, a sea of possibilities. My company, Sterling Analytics, is one of the most respected firms in the Southeast. I took their name and I gave it a new meaning, one forged in integrity and skill, not just inheritance. My brother, Greg, is now 3 years sober. We have coffee once a month. It's often quiet, sometimes a little awkward, but it's real. He's starting over, working as a project manager for a small construction firm, and for the first time in my life, I am genuinely proud of him. He is building something, not just taking up space. I haven't spoken to my parents. They still live in that grand, hollow house in Charleston, presiding over the diminished remnants of their empire. From what I hear, they maintain the polished exterior, but everyone knows the truth. They are relics in a museum of their own making. My entire life, my father lectured me about the sterling legacy. I see now that his legacy was a gilded cage. My real legacy is the quiet peace I feel right now, the freedom that comes from self-respect. My mother's words on that terrace were meant to be a final, crushing blow. She told me I was lucky to be included out of pity. But she was wrong. The ultimate act of this so-called family revenge wasn't tearing their world down. It was building my own, and in doing so, proving that my worth was never theirs to grant or define in the first place. So, what is the lesson in all of this? What is the final moral at the end of such a painful family story? For a long time, I thought justice had to be loud. I thought it was a storm, a fire, a reckoning that would burn everything to the ground. But I've learned that sometimes, true justice is quiet. It's simply the act of stepping aside and allowing people to finally face the consequences of their own choices. My revenge wasn't in shutting down their accounts. It was in shutting down the lifelong account of emotional support and unpaid labor I had given them. I didn't destroy their family. I just stopped being the sole pillar holding it up. We are taught that blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that peace is thicker than blood. Respect is thicker than blood. The family you choose, the friends who see you, who champion you, who love you without condition, that is the family that will sustain you. And what about forgiveness? For my brother, who took accountability, it comes easily. For my parents, forgiveness is a more complex piece. It is accepting they may never be the people I needed them to be and loving them from a great, safe distance. It's a forgiveness that is not for them, but for me. It is the final act of reclaiming my own heart, of refusing to let their bitterness poison my future. It is the ultimate boundary. My story is just one story, but I know I am not alone in this. The journey to reclaim your own worth is the most important one you will ever take. If this story spoke to the truth of your own life, I want you to do one last thing: subscribe and join this community. This is a space for those of us who have learned to build our own legacies on our own terms. You are not a footnote in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. Thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself, and never let anyone else tell you what you are worth.